part 4 on how I ended up engaged to somebody who ended up with cancer. And I ended up taking care of them and being their power of attorney in my late teens, early 20s. If you haven't seen the first 2 parts, go back and watch it, or none of this is going to make any sense. But this all has a huge impact on the direction my life goes in. And I'm not going to lie, I'm eating a Rice Krispie treat right now because this story makes me sick. It's not a fun story to relive, and it still is deeply attached to my emotions. I don't think I'll ever get over this, but it's quite interesting. And I want to encourage people to be careful who you love and who you're there for, because it can forever change you as a person. Part of me is scared to tell this story because she was such a bully and so manipulative. I just know that if she had a chance to respond, she would call me a liar and try to discredit me, as she always has. But I don't want to be scared anymore. I want to be brave. So if I end up shaking during the story, just know it definitely is attached to some deep roots. And it's something I never thought I would go through in my early 20s. And it's definitely a choice I made to help someone go through this experience. But it still actually is my real life, and it kind of fucks me up still. All right, back to the story. So she's in the ICU. Things are getting progressively worse. She now has developed a condition called ARDS. This is where your lungs stop exchanging oxygen and your blood gases are off. People with ARDS do not have a high survival rate, and I start researching this and see that. It's like day 4 or 5, maybe 5 or 6. And I had been working on my laptop while going back and forth and not sleeping at all. I lost a ton of weight during this experience, not that it really mattered because I just wasn't eating. I was eating like 1 banana and an electrolyte to keep me sustained through the day. I think some of this chronic stress in that specific time period was part of the reason I have adrenal damage. I don't know. I say part of, not the entire reason. But I digress. So things get very serious. They tell us she has ARDS, and I have to start making decisions. The doctor sits me down and asks me what I want to do. Do I want to have a rotary bed flown in because they don't have any at this hospital? A rotary bed is where they can put people who are intubated or on a breathing tube on a bed that flips back and forth and helps the blood circulate so they're not just stagnant, and kind of try to get the lungs to do what they're supposed to. Or do they want to put her on, it wasn't oxygen, it was like carbon something, where they start feeding that down the breathing tube to try to get the little sacs, the alveoli in the lungs to open up. I can't remember anymore, but nitrous oxide to open her lungs up. I believe that's the correct thing. I hope so. But anyways, they bring in this second huge machine in a room where she's already on pressors, propofol, the whole gamut. I have pictures of the room, and it was the scariest thing that I ever had to be a part of, probably. Medical knowledge and asking questions and being aware of what was going on made the situation even scarier. It's super scary not to know what all the machines are for, but it's super scary to understand the level of support someone needs when they're on those many machines. At this point, they are checking residuals, and I am there for that late at night where they pull all the stomach contents that she's now getting a feeding tube for out of her stomach to check if her stomach is digesting it. And at this point, we're digesting some of the formula from the feeding tube, but not a lot. And I'm sitting by the bedside, like I said, making sure to suction the corners of her mouth so that the saliva and secretions that she gets aren't irritating her, because it would cause her to stir, even through being on sedation, or choke. Watching someone on a breathing tube is hard enough. Watching them choke on their saliva because they're producing a lot of saliva because they have a balloon in their throat holding a breathing tube in place is really difficult. So I just tried to make her as comfortable as possible. I would also put things she liked on the TV, and I started hanging pictures around the room of us, because sometimes they would let her have small sedation vacations where they would let her wake up a little bit just to check that she still had brain function and look around and go back to sleep. So I wanted to make sure when they were allowing her to do those little sedation vacations, she had familiar things in this cold clinical room. At one point, her mom brings a picture of her dog up there, and I'm like, what a great idea. Anyways, when they come, they start watching the game and doing all that. And it actually gets to the point where they're so rowdy, her family, they get kicked out and told they have to wait in the waiting room. While they're in the waiting room, they end up doing an endoscopy. Can't remember why. I guess to check the lungs to see what was going on, why they're so full of fluid, I believe. It's been a long time, guys. But during this situation, I get slapped in the face by mom. The whole family is there, some out-of-town relatives I had never met. I had met mom and dad because I lived with mom and boyfriend, and I had met dad because we had actually gone on a trip to dad's house. He lived in the country, and we went out there for the 4th of July one year and set off fireworks. And I remember not feeling super comfortable with the dad just because he was like a very quiet, stern man. She also had this side of her that was kind of from her dad that kind of was like that, a little off-putting. But I digress. Everyone's there, and he's actually the nicer one to me during this experience. Told her exactly what my partner had said, that she just wanted to make sure she was cared for, and this pissed mom off a lot. I was frustrated with mom at this point because she just wasn't following any of the protocols, whether it was in the regular floor or the ICU. And I was just like, I don't understand why you can't just follow the rules. And at this point, they started to complain that I was helping with the cares, like suctioning the saliva and doing the, I wasn't doing it alone because she was on a breathing tube. So when the nurse would come in and need help, like moving positions so she didn't get bed sores, I would assist in that because it's a very simple task. But of course, it was something I never attempted while they weren't in the room. But I could handle the suction when they weren't in the room, and they felt confident I could do that too, just for the corner of the mouth secretions if she became uncomfortable and started coughing from the saliva pooling. But the family thought this was some crazy medical procedure, and so they started complaining that I was doing unnecessary medical procedures on her, which truly wasn't the case, and all I was doing was keeping her comfortable. Which included wiping her ass, by the way. But they would rather her sit and shit so the nurse could do some magical fucking ass wiping, I don't know, and choke on secretions than do what's best for her. And that's probably why I ended up the power of attorney. So anyways, there's one day where we're on this nitrous oxide, and at that point, family's gone out to margarita lunch. I sit behind as always because I can't stand to leave her because I would be terrified in that position, and I have a lot of empathy. So I'm sitting with her and she starts crashing. All the monitors start going off. Her heart rate's through the roof. Nobody's stimulating her, bothering her. The TV is completely off at this point because if I ever noticed that the TV would get too loud, she would start to have issues. So anyways, she starts to crash to the point where the breathing machine is no longer even working for her. And they pull the tube off the machine and they start bagging her. If you've ever seen a paramedic show, it's just that bag. It just has like a tube piece that connects to the other tube. They start bagging her. They're like, you're an EMT, bag while I do CPR. So I'm bagging while they do CPR until they call backup nurse and respiratory therapy to get in the room and readjust all the settings on the ventilator because it's no longer working or keeping her alive and she's officially dying right in front of me. I keep my cool during it, but as soon as the secondary nurse and respiratory therapist arrive with crash cart, I remember walking out in the hallway and just putting my hands on my head like this and watching to see if I was going to literally watch her die. It was one of those things where I couldn't look away because I needed to know what was happening, but it was the scariest thing to watch ever, and I felt like right then and there in the ICU hallway, my chest was going to cave in. But I didn't care what happened to me. I didn't care if I collapsed or passed out. I was like, I have to see this through and see what's about to happen. Eventually, they get her stabilized, and I feel comfortable enough to turn my back to call the family and say, she just about died. Y'all need to get here. They're drunk, having a good time, sipping margaritas, and they're like, okay, we'll come up when we get there. No urgency, no pep in their step, nothing. Being in the ICU for the maximum amount of time and taking care of her as much as I could and calling in and getting some sort of like work break for family issues. I can't remember. I think I was on FMLA. I go home finally and crash on like day 7. It's like day 7 or 8. I go home, I'm asleep for 4 hours. I get a call from the family. Things have kind of slowed down and chilled out between me and the family. We've come to like a mutual point because they realize that I'm the power of attorney, and if I don't want them in that damn room, I don't have to let them in that damn room. So then they chilled the fuck out. Me and the nurses station had already had a chat about whether they were going to be in the room or not, and I said it depends on their behavior and if they're looking out for her well-being. And I had that same chat with the family. So they started to be better, and so I backed off, and they backed off of me. But not before her mom had slapped me in the face, so that was shitty. Anyways, my mom ended up coming up that day that her mom slapped me in the face to ensure I wasn't assaulted anymore. That was probably the one time my mom really showed up for me in a long time. Anyways, the next part will be out shortly.